The Valoran mining colony on asteroid K-77 was dying. Commander Xylith stood in the command center, watching the destruction through a cracked viewport. His compound eyes, which could see in 12 different spectrums of light, showed him things he wished he could not see. The Devourer's swarm had surrounded the station 18 hours ago, and since then, they had been eating it piece by piece. Xylith was a tall insectoid being, with 4 arms and a hard shell that covered most of his body. He had commanded this mining station for 15 years, and in all that time he had never felt true fear. Today, fear was all he knew. "Commander, we have lost contact with sections 7 through 12, said his communications officer, a small amphibian named Dorith. His webbed hands trembled as he worked his console. "The Devourers have breached the outer hull in those areas. Everyone there is ... gone. Such a small word for such a terrible thing. 300 workers had been in those sections. Families, children. Now they were nothing but food for the swarm. The Devourers were the most feared enemy in the galaxy. No one knew where they came from or what they truly wanted. They were shapeless things, masses of dark matter that existed partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. They could phase through walls, ignore most weapons, and they never stopped eating. In the past 100 years, they had consumed over 400 worlds. Entire civilizations had disappeared into their endless hunger. "What about the distress signal?" Xylith asked. "Has anyone responded?" "The Galactic Council received our message," Dorith replied. "They are sending a fleet. But, Commander, the fleet is 9 days away. They would not survive 9 hours." Xylith turned to look at the tactical display. The swarm appeared as a cloud of red dots surrounding the station. There were approximately 20,000 individual Devourer units out there, and more were arriving every hour. The station's defense systems had been destroyed in the first wave of attacks. They had no weapons, no shields, and no way to escape. "There must be someone closer," Xylith said. "Anyone. Check every frequency." Dorith hesitated. His large eyes blinked rapidly, which among his species was a sign of extreme nervousness. "Commander, there is one frequency we have not tried. The old frequency." Xylith felt his blood run cold. Every species in the Galactic Council knew about the old frequency. It was the emergency channel that connected to Earth space, to the humans. But no one had used that channel in 200 years. No one dared. The humans were a mystery wrapped in terror. They had appeared on the galactic stage 3 centuries ago, a young species from an unremarkable planet. At first, the older civilizations had looked at them with amusement. Then, the unification wars happened, and amusement turned to horror. During those wars, humanity had proven itself to be the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen. They fought with a fury that defied logic. They built weapons that broke the laws of physics. They defeated every enemy sent against them, destroying fleets that should have crushed them easily. When the wars ended, the Galactic Council had demanded that humanity reduce its military and remain within its home system. The humans had agreed, retreating behind their borders and falling silent. For 200 years they had stayed silent. The galaxy had learned to forget them, to pretend they were not there. Some younger species did not even believe the stories about the unification wars. They thought the humans were just another minor civilization hiding in the corner of the galaxy. Xylith knew better. He had studied history. He knew what humans were capable of. "The Council forbids contact with Earth," he said slowly. "The Council is 9 days away," Dorith replied. "Commander, we have 3,000 people on this station. Families, children. If there is any chance, even the smallest chance, that someone will come." Another explosion shook the station. On the tactical display, Xylith watched a group of Devourer units breach the residential sector. He heard screams through the communication system, screams that cut off suddenly and horribly. He thought of the children in the station's school, huddled together in fear. He thought of the workers who had trusted him to keep them safe. He thought of his own family, waiting for him in their quarters, hoping he would find a way to save them. "Send the signal," he said. Dorth's webbed hands moved across the console. The message was simple. "This is Valoran mining colony K-77. We are under attack by Devourer Swarm. 3,000 civilians. Please help anyone. The signal went out into the void. Traveling on a frequency that had been silent for 2 centuries. For 47 minutes, nothing happened. Xyleth began to accept that no help was coming. The humans either could not hear, or they did not care. Why would they care? The Valorans had voted with the Council to restrict human expansion. They had supported the sanctions that kept humanity trapped in their home system. Why would humans risk anything to help them now? Then the censor officer made a sound that Xyleth had never heard before. It was a high-pitched whistle of pure terror. Commander. Something just exited faster than light travel at the edge of the system. Xyleth spun around. The Council fleet. That is impossible. They cannot be here so fast. It is not the Council fleet, Commander. The energy signature is... It is human. The main display flickered, and a new image appeared. A single ship, small by galactic standards, was moving toward the station at incredible speed. The ship was not beautiful like Council vessels. It was angular and harsh, covered in armor plates and weapon systems. Scorch marks and welded patches covered its hull. Evidence of battles survived. It looked like a predator. Lean and hungry and built for one purpose only, the ship broadcast a message that cut through all. Devourer jamming as if it did not exist. This is Captain Daniel Marsh of the Earth vessel Relentless. We received your distress call. Hang on. We are coming. Zilla stared at the display. One ship. One small human ship against a swarm of 20,000 devourers. It was madness. It was suicide. It cannot be serious, Dorth whispered. One ship cannot fight that swarm. They will be destroyed in minutes. But the Relentless did not slow down. It did not turn away. It accelerated toward the swarm, and as it did, its weapon systems began to power up. Lights flickered along its hull as energy built in its guns and missile tubes. Xyleth watched the human. Ship approached certain death, and he felt something he had not felt in 18 hours. He felt hope. Not because he believed one ship could save them, but because someone had answered. Someone had heard their cry and chosen to come, knowing they would probably die. Who are these humans? Dorth asked quietly. Xyleth remembered the old histories. The stories of the Unification Wars. He remembered what the Elders said about humanity. The warning they gave to every young Valoran. They are the ones who run toward danger, Xyleth said softly. They are the ones who fight when fighting is impossible. They are... He paused, watching the Relentless close the distance. They are either very brave or very crazy. Perhaps both. On the display, the Relentless reached weapon range of the swarm. For a moment, everything was still. Then the human ship opened fire, and the void lit up with destruction. Captain Daniel Marsh stood on the bridge of the Relentless, his hands clasped behind his back. He was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. 30 years in Earth's defense fleet had given him scars on his body and iron in his soul. He had fought in battles that would never appear in any history book. He had seen things that would break most beings, but he had never run from a fight, and he was not going to start now. Lieutenant Harper, give me a count on the swarm, he said. His voice was calm, almost casual, as if he were asking about the weather. Katie Harper was young, only 28, but she had earned her place on this ship through skill and courage. Her dark hair was cut close to her head, and her eyes were sharp and steady as she studied her console. Approximately 18,000 Devourer units. Captain, they have formed a sphere around the mining station. It is a standard consumption formation. They are eating the station from the outside in. Navigator Lopez. How long until they breach the main habitat? Miguel Lopez checked his instruments. He was a thin man with quick hands and a mind that could calculate trajectory faster than most computers. At current rate of consumption, maybe 2 hours, sir? Maybe less. Marsh nodded. 2 hours. 2 hours to save 3,000 lives against an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. Then we have work to do. Weapons Officer Carter, what do we have? Senior Chief Gregory Carter was the oldest member of the bridge crew. He had served with Marsh for 15 years, through battles that neither man spoke about. His hands, rough and scarred, moved across the weapons console with practiced ease. Full load of Hellfire torpedoes, 60 plasma charges. The point defense systems are at 100%. And we have the new device from research and development, the Gravity Lance. Yes, sir. They said it is experimental. 60% chance it works. 40% chance it destroys us instead. Marsh actually smiled at that. I like those odds. Open a channel to the colony. The view screen flickered, and Commander Xylith's face appeared. The alien looked terrible. His compound eyes were dull with exhaustion and fear, and his mandibles clicked nervously. Human Captain, Xylith said through his translator. I moo. Saint, inform you that this swarm has destroyed 14 Council warships in the past month. They have consumed fleets of 100 vessels. Your ship, while we appreciate your response, cannot possibly survive against such numbers. You should retreat while you still can. Marsh leaned forward slightly. Commander, how many of your people are still alive? Approximately 2,300? We have lost 700 in the last hour. And with respect, Commander, every minute we spend talking about why we cannot win is a minute those people do not have. Marsh's voice was gentle but firm. I need you to do something for me. Move all your surviving colonists to the deepest part of your station. The most protected area you have, the ore processing center. But why? Because in about 15 minutes, things are going to become very loud, very bright, and very dangerous for everything outside your station. I do not want your people caught in it. Xylith stared at the human for a long moment. There was something in Marsh's eyes that the alien could not identify. It was not arrogance. It was not fear. It was not even hope. It was certainty, the absolute belief that he would do what needed to be done. I will move them now, Xylith said, and closed the channel. Marsh turned to face his crew. There were 42 humans on the Relentless, and they were all looking at him. He could see fear in some of their eyes, but he could also see determination. They knew the odds. They had chosen to come anyway. All hands, he said over the ship's intercom. This is the captain. 2,300 civilians are about to die unless we do something about it. They sent a distress call into the void, hoping someone would answer. We answered. That is what humans do. We do not leave people behind. He paused, letting his words settle. I will not lie to you. This is going to be hard. Harder than anything we have done before. Some of us might not survive. But those people down there, they have families. They have children. They have dreams and hopes and futures. They deserve a chance to live, and we are going to give them that chance. All stations report ready, one by one. The confirmations came in. Engineering, weapons, medical, damage control, navigation, 42 voices. Steady and strong, Katie Harper spoke quietly from her station. Captain, the swarm has noticed us. A portion is breaking off to intercept. Approximately 2,000 units. Only 2,000? They do not think very highly of us. Marsh settled into his command chair. Carter, let us show them why their ancestors learned to fear the dark. The Relentless surged forward, engines burning at maximum power. On the tactical display, the swarm appeared as a wall of red, as a mass of hungry darkness waiting to consume them. The first volley was 8 Hellfire torpedoes. They streaked through the void, leaving trails of fire behind them. But they were not aimed at individual devourer units. They were aimed at the spaces between them, the invisible connections that allowed the swarm to coordinate. The explosions were beautiful and terrible. Antimatter met matter and erased both from existence. 700 devourer units vanished in the first 3 seconds. Direct hits across all targets, Harper reported, her voice carrying a note of surprise. The swarm coordination is disrupted. They are having trouble reforming. Keep them off balance. Carter, plasma charges, pattern delta. The Relentless had been built in the decades after humanity's first contact with the galaxy. During that time, humans had learned a hard truth in a universe full of ancient and powerful civilizations. The only way to survive was to become too dangerous to attack. Every system on the Relentless, from its weapons to its shields to its engines, had been designed with one purpose: to make anything that threatened humanity regret that choice. The plasma charges detonated in a cascade, each explosion triggering the next. A wave of superheated matter swept through the approaching swarm. The Devourers, who could normally phase through solid matter, found they could not phase through plasma. It existed in both dimensions simultaneously. Swarm units down to 14,000, Harper said. But Captain, they are adapting. The main body is moving toward us. Could Lopez take us in closer? I want to be inside their formation, sir. You heard me? Get us in there. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Flying into the heart of an enemy swarm was suicide. Every tactical manual ever written said so, but this was a human ship, and humans had never been very good at following the rules. The Relentless dove into the swarm, and the real battle began. Devourer units attacked from every direction, their dark tendrils reaching for the hull. The point defense guns screamed, firing thousands of rounds per minute. The shields flared as they absorbed impacts that would have destroyed a council ship. Portside taking damage, reported Chief Sandra Vance, the damage control officer. Deck 7, Sections 4 through 9. Seal it and reroute power. Carter, the gravity lance. Now, as her research said, there was only a 60% chance it would not destroy us too. Fire it. The gravity lance was humanity's newest weapon. It did not fire a bullet or a beam. It created a point of infinite gravity for exactly 0.3 of a second. 3,000. Devourer units suddenly found themselves being pulled toward a single point in space. They compressed, crushed together into a ball of dark matter. Then the lance collapsed, and the gravitational pressure released all at once. The explosion scattered Devourer remains across 1,000 kilometers, but there were still thousands more. And the Relentless was alone. The battle had been raging for 40 minutes, and the Relentless was bleeding. 3 crew members were dead. 17 more lay in the medical bay, with injuries ranging from burns to broken bones. The gravity lance had overheated after its first use and could not be fired again. Half the plasma charges were gone. The portside shields were failing, but Captain Daniel Marsh had not given up. He would never give up. Swarm count, he asked, his voice steady, despite the chaos around him. Katie Harper checked her console. Her face was pale, and there was a cut above her left eye that she had not bothered to treat. 8,000 units remaining, Captain. We have destroyed 10,000, but they keep adapting. They are learning our attack patterns. 10,000 Devourers destroyed by a single ship. It was a victory that would be remembered in military academies for centuries. But it was not enough. 8,000 units still hung in space between the Relentless and the mining colony, and they were growing more coordinated by the minute. Time until they reached the station. At current speed, 30 minutes. Maybe less. Marsh closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of the colonists huddled in the OR processing center, waiting for rescue that might never come. He thought of the children who would never grow up, the families who would never see each other again. Open a channel to Earth, he said. The bridge fell silent. Navigator Lopez turned to stare at him. Chief Carter's hands froze over his weapons console. Even Harper, who rarely showed emotion, looked shocked. Sir? She asked quietly. You heard me? Priority 1. Emergency Protocol Omega. Emergency Protocol Omega. It had not been used in over a century. It was reserved for the most extreme situations, moments when human survival itself was at stake. Using it meant calling on resources that the galaxy did not know existed. Channel open, sir? Ash spoke clearly, his words carrying across the vast distance to Earth. This is Captain Daniel Marsh of the Relentless, transmitting to Earth Defense Command. We are engaged with a Devourer swarm of approximately 8,000 units in the Valoran system. We are defending a civilian population of 2,300 aliens. Request immediate reinforcement. Repeat. Request immediate reinforcement. Protocol Omega. The response came in 11 seconds. It should have taken minutes for a signal to travel that far. But humanity had developed technologies that the galaxy knew nothing about. Relentless. This is Admiral Patricia Cole, at Defense Command. Reinforcements are already on the way. Hold your position. Help is coming. Marsh frowned. Admiral, with respect, our sensors show no ships within range. The nearest human vessel is 6 hours away at maximum speed. There was a pause. When Admiral Cole spoke again, her voice carried something that sounded almost like satisfaction. Captain Marsh, who said anything about ships being far away? In the Valoran system, space began to behave strangely. Commander Xyleth watched from the mining colony's command center, where he and his surviving officers monitored the battle. They had witnessed the Relentless destroy 10,000 devourers, a feat that should have been impossible. Now they watched the human ship fighting desperately against the remaining swarm, and they felt hope slipping away. The human vessel is taking heavy damage, Dorothy reported. Its shields are failing. It cannot survive much longer. Xyleth did not respond. His compound eyes were fixed on his sensor display, where something impossible was happening. Space itself seemed to be folding, rippling like water disturbed by stones. Commander, I am reading energy signatures. Multiple signatures, but there is nothing there. Where are they coming from? Everywhere. Across the Valoran system, in dozens of locations at once, reality tore open. These were not normal, faster-than-light exits. These were violent ruptures. Holes punched through the fabric of space by technologies that should not exist. From each rupture came a ship, not small patrol vessels like the Relentless. These were massy. VE warships, dreadnoughts and carriers and battleships. Each one bore the scars of centuries, their hulls patched and repaired countless times. Some of the designs were 300 years old, ships that should have been scrapped generations ago. But they were not scrapped. They were here. 47 capital ships emerged into the Valoran system, each one broadcasting the same identifier signal. A signal that had not been heard in 200 years. The Ghost Fleet had awakened. On the bridge of the Relentless. Katie Harper's voice cracked as she read her sensors. Captain, I am counting 47 capital ships. All human. Sir, some of these ship designs should not exist anymore. They were supposed to be decommissioned after the Unification Wars. They were decommissioned, Marsh said quietly. Officially. On paper? In reality, they were hidden. Hidden. Hidden where? Everywhere. Asteroid fields. Deep space stations. Pocket dimensions that our scientists developed and never told anyone about. Marsh smiled. And there was something ancient in that smile. Something that connected him to generations of humans who had planned for this moment. The galaxy thought we were weak, Lieutenant. We let them think that. But humanity has learned one hard lesson above all others. Never let your enemies know your true strength until you need to use it. A new voice came over the communications system. It was old and rough, carrying the weight of decades of command. This is Admiral Victor Marshall of the Earth vessel Sovereign, flagship of the Ghost Fleet, assuming command of all human forces in this system. Relentless, you have done more than enough. Fall back and repair your damage. We will handle things from here.
Acknowledged, Admiral Marsh replied.
Relentless falling back? The swarm is yours. Well, the Relentless withdrew from the battle zone, its engines sputtering and its hull venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches. But its crew was alive, and they had done what they came to do. They had held the line until help arrived. Now it was the Ghost Fleet's turn. On the mining colony, Commander Xyleth watched the ancient human warships form a wall between the Devourer swarm and his people. The swarm, which had never retreated from anything in its existence, hesitated. Open a channel to those ships, Xyleth ordered, the connection established. And Xyleth found himself looking at a human face that seemed carved from granite. Admiral Marshall was old, perhaps 70 standard years, with gray hair and eyes that had seen things no being should see. Admiral Xyleth said, I am Commander Xyleth of the Valoran mining colony. Your captain came to save us when no one else would. Now you bring this fleet. Why? Why do you risk so much for people who are not your own? Admiral Marshall was silent for a long moment. Behind him, His bridge crew worked their stations with quiet efficiency, preparing for battle. 200 years ago, he said finally, my species made a choice. We could have conquered the galaxy. We had the weapons. We had the ships. We had the anger. Every species that attacked us, we defeated. Every fleet sent against Earth, we destroyed. We came very close to becoming monsters. He paused, and something like pain flickered across his face. But we chose differently. We chose to step back, to watch, to wait. We built our strength in secret, not for conquest, but for the day when it would be needed. For 2 centuries, we have watched the galaxy suffer. We have watched the Devourers consume world after world. And every day we asked ourselves, when do we act? When is it right? His eyes hardened. Your distress call answered that question. Not because you are important. Not because we gain anything from saving you, but because you asked for help, and there was no one else coming. That has to be enough. That is enough. Xyleth felt something shift inside him. For centuries, his species had viewed humans as dangerous and unpredictable. They were all those things. But they were also something else, something his language had no word for. What are you going to do now, Admiral? Marshall smiled. And it was the smile of a predator finally released from its cage. Now, Commander, we are going to teach that swarm what it means to be afraid, the Ghost Fleet advanced. And the stars themselves seemed to tremble. The Devourers had existed for thousands of years. They had consumed over 400 worlds. They had faced the greatest fleets that the galaxy could assemble and had destroyed them all. They had no fear because fear was an emotion, and the swarm possessed only hunger. They had no concept of defeat because they had never been defeated, until now. The Ghost Fleet did not fight like council ships. Council vessels maintained careful formations, followed established protocols, and communicated constantly with Central Command. They fought by the book because the book had been written by civilizations that were ancient when humans were still living in caves. The Ghost Fleet had written its own book, Admiral Victor. Marshall stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, watching the tactical display with cold, patient eyes. The swarm was reforming after its encounter with the relentless, approximately 8,000 units, gathering into a dense cloud of dark matter. Analysis of swarm behavior, he ordered. His tactical officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Diana Stone, studied her console. They are confused, Admiral. The relentless disrupted their coordination patterns. They are trying to re-establish communication links between units. Good. We will not give them time to succeed. Marshall turned to his communications officer. Fleet-wide broadcast. All ships execute attack pattern Ragnarok. Ragnarok. It was a word from old Earth mythology, referring to the final battle at the end of the world. It was an appropriate name for what was about to happen. The Ghost Fleet split into 5 groups, each one moving with perfect coordination. But within each group, every ship fought as an individual predator. They did not maintain rigid formations. They did not fire in synchronized volleys. Each captain knew the objective, and each captain was free to achieve it however they saw fit. This was how humans fought. Not as machines following orders, but as wolves hunting together. Each one independent, each one deadly, all working toward the same goal. The first group, led by the heavy cruiser Vengeance, struck the swarm's left flank. They did not use conventional weapons. Instead, they deployed gravity mines, devices that created microscopic black holes for fractions of a second. The mines detonated inside the swarm, pulling hundreds of Devourer units into points of infinite density before collapsing. The second group, centered around the carrier Prometheus, released fighter squadrons. These were not manned fighters, but autonomous drones, each one controlled by an artificial intelligence that had been designed specifically to fight the drones swarmed through the enemy formation, identifying the units that served as communication hubs and destroying them with precise plasma bolts. The third group consisted of older ships, veterans of the Unification Wars. Their hulls were scarred, and their technology was outdated by modern standards. But their crews had trained for this moment for 200 years, passing their knowledge from generation to generation. They knew tricks that modern officers had never imagined. The fourth group held back, forming a defensive line between the battle and the mining colony. These were the shield ships, vessels designed to absorb damage rather than deal it. They were the last line of defense if everything else failed. The fifth group was the Sovereign and its escort ships. They waited, watching, coordinating. Admiral Marshall had not survived 6 decades of military service by rushing into battle. He waited until the swarm was fully committed to fighting the other groups. He waited until their formation was disrupted, and their coordination was broken. Then he struck. The Sovereign was the oldest ship in the Ghost Fleet. Built before humanity had even achieved faster-than-light travel, it had been upgraded countless times over the centuries, layer upon layer of new technology added to its ancient frame. But at its core, it was still the ship that had fought in humanity's first interstellar war, and its weapons were things of legend. Main battery. Fire, Marshall ordered. The Sovereign's primary weapons were not missiles or lasers. They were kinetic accelerators, massive railguns that fired projectiles at significant fractions of the speed of light. At those velocities, even a small piece of metal carried enough energy to destroy a battleship. 12 projectiles streaked across space. They did not hit individual Devourer units. They passed through the swarm, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Each projectile created a shockwave of displaced matter, and the Devourers caught in those shockwaves simply ceased to exist in the first minute of the Ghost Fleet's attack. 2,000 Devourer units were destroyed on the mining colony. Commander Xyleth watched in stunned silence. He had seen battles before. He had studied the great naval engagements of galactic history, but he had never seen anything like this. "They are winning," Dorothy whispered beside him. "They are actually winning." The swarm was adapting, as it always did. It had learned from its fight with the Relentless. It was trying to counter the Ghost Fleet's tactics, spreading out to avoid the gravity mines, clustering to overwhelm the fighter drones. But the humans adapted faster. Every time the swarm changed its strategy, the Ghost Fleet responded within seconds. Ships that had been attacking suddenly withdrew, replaced by vessels with different weapons and different tactics. It was as if the humans could read the swarm's mind, anticipating every move before it happened. "They doing this?" Xyleth asked, unable to hide his amazement. "How do they coordinate so quickly?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Daniel Marsh appeared on the communication screen, his face tired but satisfied. The Relentless had withdrawn to a safe distance, but its sensors were still monitoring the battle.
Commander.
"I thought you might want to understand what you were seeing." Marsh's voice carried a hint of pride. "For 200 years, we have studied the Devourers. Every attack they made on other species, we analyzed. Every tactic they used, we documented. We built simulations of their behavior and trained our crews to fight them thousands of times in virtual battles." He gestured toward the tactical display. "You know the Devourers better than they know themselves. We have spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. Every ship in that fleet has practiced this battle so many times that they can fight it in their sleep. They know every possible response the swarm can make because they have seen every response in simulation." Xyleth stared at the human captain. "You knew this day would come. We hoped it would not. We prayed that the galaxy would find a way to deal with the Devourers without our help. We gave them 200 years to solve the problem." Marsh's expression hardened. "They did not. So now we solve it ourselves." In space, the battle continued. The swarm was down to 5,000 units, then 4,000, then 3. The Devourers had never experienced anything like this. They had no concept of retreat, no instinct to flee. They only knew how to attack, how to consume. But there was nothing left to consume. Every ship they reached was either too heavily shielded to breach or too fast to catch. Every attack they made was countered before it could succeed. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers were losing. Admiral Marshall watched the swarm's numbers decline with grim satisfaction, but he did not celebrate. He knew that this battle was just the beginning. Admiral Lieutenant Stone said quietly, "The swarm has dropped below 1,000 units. They are clustering together, forming a dense core. That is their survival instinct. They are trying to protect the Queen. Marshall leaned forward. All ships converge on the swarm core. We end this now. The ghost fleet closed in, a ring of iron and fire surrounding the last remnants of the swarm. The devourers thrashed and fought, but they were trapped. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Open a channel to the swarm, Marshall ordered. His communications officer looked confused. Sir, the devourers do not communicate. They have no language. They've never needed one before. But they will hear this. Marshall stood, facing the view screen. This is Admiral Victor Marshall of the human ghost fleet. You have attacked innocent people under our protection. You have caused suffering and death across this galaxy for too long. Today, it ends. Today, you learn that there are consequences for the pain you have caused. He paused. And when he spoke again, his voice was cold as the void between stars. Run back to whatever dark corner of the universe spawned you. Tell your kind what you have seen here. Tell them that humanity remembers. Tell them that we are watching. And tell them that if they ever threaten innocent life again, we will find them. We will hunt them. And we will destroy them. The ghost fleet opened fire one final time. The Battle of Valoran lasted exactly 43 minutes after the arrival of the ghost fleet. When it ended, not a single devourer unit remained in the system. 20,000 of the most feared creatures in the galaxy had been reduced to nothing but drifting atoms. The silence that followed was profound on the mining colony. 2,300 survivors emerged from the AOR processing center. They looked up through the repaired viewports at the fleet of human ships hanging in space above them. Many of them wept. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stood in stunned silence, unable to believe they were still alive. Commander Zillith walked through the crowds of his people, checking on the injured, comforting the grieving, organizing the recovery efforts. His mind kept returning to the battle he had witnessed, the impossible victory that had saved everything he loved. The humans had not just defeated the Devourers, they had annihilated them. They had done, in less than an hour, what the combined fleets of the Galactic Council had failed to do in a century. And they had done it as 4 strangers. 3 days after the battle, a shuttle from the Relentless landed on the colony. Captain Daniel Marsh stepped out, followed by several members of his crew. They carried medical supplies, food, and repair equipment. They also carried something else, something that Xyleth had not expected. They carried kindness. The human crew members moved through the colony, helping wherever they could. They treated the injured with advanced medical technology. They repaired damaged systems with tools and knowledge that the Valorans had never seen. They played with the children, teaching them Earth games and telling them stories about a blue planet on the far side of the galaxy. Xyleth found Marsh standing at a viewport, looking out at the stars. The human captain looked tired, older than he had seemed during the battle. The weight of command, Xyleth realized, did not lift just because the fighting was over. "Captain, I do not know how to thank you," Xyleth said. "You saved my people. You risked everything for beings you had never met." Marsh turned to face him. His expression was thoughtful, perhaps even sad. "Commander, may I tell you something about my species?" "Please." 300 years ago, humans discovered we were not alone in the universe. It should have been the greatest moment in our history. Instead, it became the worst. Marsh's voice was quiet, heavy with old pain. "The first aliens we met saw us as resources to be exploited. They attacked our colonies, enslaved our people, tried to conquer our homeworld. We had to fight to survive." He paused, looking back at the stars. "We won those fights. We won them so completely that the galaxy became afraid of us. They called us monsters, demons, a plague upon the stars. And maybe they were right. During the Unification Wars, we did terrible things. We destroyed fleets. We burned worlds. We became the very thing our enemies had accused us of being." Xyleth listened in silence. This was a side of humanity he had never considered, the pain beneath the power. "When the wars ended, we looked at ourselves and did not like what we saw," Marsh continued. "We had become weapons, tools of destruction and nothing more. So we made a choice. We withdrew from the galaxy. We hid our fleets. We let the other species believe we were weak and defeated. And we spent 200 years trying to remember what it meant to be human, and what does it mean? Zeleth asked softly. Marsh smiled, and it was a genuine smile, warm and kind. It means we help people, not because we gain something from it, not because they can pay us back, but because they need help, and we can provide it. That is the core of who we are, Commander. We are a species of helpers. We just forgot it for a while. News of the Battle of Valoran spread across the galaxy within days. The story changed everything. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Ambassadors from 100 species packed the Great Hall, demanding answers. How had humans hidden such power? What were their intentions? Were they a threat that needed to be contained? Admiral Patricia Cole stood before the assembly. She was a small woman. She spoke with the authority of someone who represented the most powerful military force in known space. For 200 years, she said, humanity has watched this galaxy. We watched the Devourers consume world after world while the Council debated response strategies. We watched species cry for help while your fleets were too busy or too far away to respond. We watched innocent beings die because no one with the power to save them could be bothered to try. She paused, letting her words echo through the chamber. We are done watching. The assembly erupted in chaos. Some species demanded that humanity be sanctioned, their fleets destroyed before they could become a threat. Others quietly began calculating how to align themselves with Earth. Politicians argued and diplomats negotiated, and nothing was resolved. But on the mining colony in the Valoran system, none of that mattered. Captain Marsh stood beside Commander Zeleth on a repaired observation deck. Below them, human and Valoran crew members worked side by side, rebuilding what had been destroyed. Children laughed and played, their fear already fading into memory. What happens now? Zeleth asked. Marsh looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness that held so many threats and so many possibilities. Now we do what we should have done a long time ago. The Devourers were one threat among many. There are others out there, species and forces that prey on the weak because no one stops them. For 2 centuries, we let the galaxy handle its own problems. We told ourselves it was not our responsibility. He shook his head slowly. We were wrong. The Council will not accept this. They will see you as a threat. But we are not asking for their permission. Marsh extended his hand toward Zeleth, that human gesture of trust and partnership. We are not offering to rule the galaxy, Commander. We are not trying to build an empire. We are just offering to help. When someone calls for aid, we will answer. That is the promise we make. Zeleth looked at the offered hand. He thought about everything he had learned in the past few days. He thought about the terror of the attack, the despair of waiting to die, the shock of rescue arriving from the most unexpected source. He thought about the ghost fleet hidden for centuries. Waiting not to conquer but to protect, he reached out and grasped Marsh's hand. Then let us begin, Captain. I believe the galaxy has much to learn about humanity. Across the stars, the news continued to spread. A distress signal had been sent, and something had answered. But what arrived was not what anyone expected. It was not a monster or a conqueror. It was something far more terrifying to those who wished harm upon the innocent. It was hope, in the dark spaces between stars. Where other threats lurked and watched, ancient beings felt something they had not felt in millennia. They felt doubt. They felt fear. Because humanity had remembered what it was. Not destroyers. Not conquerors. Not the monsters that the old stories described. Guardians. And they were watching. From that day forward, whenever a distress signal echoed across the void, whenever innocent lives hung in the balance, whenever the darkness seemed ready to swallow the light, there was always a chance that something would answer, something powerful, something determined, something that would never stop fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. Humanity had returned to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.